Some really valuable information. Hopefully you pick up a piece or two. But Mark's with Guardian. They're one of the better fall protection equipment companies that are out there, and he represents other companies as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, Mark's going to roll into his thing and do some demonstrations.
Good afternoon, guys. Okay, so we're going to kind of talk about a little bit of the ABCDs of fall protection. We'll talk about rescue. We're going to talk about our body support, our harnesses, and how to inspect them. And we'll talk about our 6-foot lanyards and SRLs and the differences and how to calculate the proper clearance. And then we'll get into a couple other specialized retractables and making sure you guys understand that each piece of equipment offers a different level of protection, and some of them have limitations as well. So it's important to understand what piece of equipment we're using for the particular hazard we have at hand. So the first one I want to talk about is rescue and effecting rescue in a timely manner. OSHA states we have to effect a rescue if somebody falls and they're suspended in midair within 15 minutes. If you ask the medical community, medical professionals, they say 5 to 7 minutes. Is everybody familiar with suspended trauma syndrome? So suspended trauma syndrome occurs after the fall, and we cut off the blood circulation, and that could have some dire consequence for us. You know, our heart is a great muscle that pumps the blood out, right? And as our muscles and arms and legs move back and forth, that creates the blood circulation. So when we fall, we're suspended in midair. Our harness, everything's going to want to ride up, and our D-ring, our dorsal D-ring, is actually going to slide up about 1.5 feet over our head, and then we're going to have these leg straps act like a tourniquet and put all that pressure and cut off the blood circulation by putting that pressure on that main artery in the leg. So when this happens, the nature of our harness is going to have us in a position kind of similar to this because of where our back D-ring is located. All the straps cinched up and tightened up, so it's very hard to move your arms back and forth and get that circulation moving. And so if the blood circulation stops, then gravity takes effect, and we have the blood travels down, and we can have blood pooling in the legs. So if you have blood pooling in the legs, you can develop blood clots. And if the blood's not filtering through the liver, you can build up toxins in the bloodstream. So there's all kinds of things that can happen to you medically when you're just suspended in midair. And your health and your physical condition is going to play a major role. We had a young guy decided, he was a skydiver, decided to take his parachute and jump off a tower, and his parachute got caught in the guidelines. He hung there for over 3 hours before the fire department got him down, but he was healthy and in good shape, and he didn't have any ill effects from it. We had a couple tower climbers years before that. A guy fell at height. His fall protection equipment arrested his fall. He was fine, no injuries. By the time the first responders got to him in 20 minutes, the gentleman passed away. So there are some serious issues when it comes to suspended trauma syndrome and the effects of blood pooling in the legs and the loss of blood circulation. If somebody falls, you want to encourage them to try to move their legs, arms and legs, particularly their legs, pump those muscles, those calf muscles, whatever they can do. You know, I always ask, what are you going to do if somebody falls? What's your plan? And unfortunately, 90% of the companies, for whatever reason, they put a good fall protection plan together, but a lot of times they don't put a good rescue plan together. So, you know, before you work at height, you know, just think about, hey, if one of us falls, what are we going to do? Maybe have a lift nearby, a ladder, or anything we could put underneath them to maybe give them a little support so they can take that, stand up a little bit and take that pressure from those leg straps on their legs. In the real world, we're not always going to have a device near us. You know how things go. But we have what we call suspension trauma relief straps. And on the side of my harnesses, guys, I have these pouches. And this little device could mean a difference between somebody living or not hanging at height. There's a couple of different styles out there from different manufacturers. Ours is like a cargo strap. It has a little lever, and I can adjust it very easily. I have a hook on one end and then on this side I have a little D-ring, and we hook them together. And the belly of the strap should be between my knees and my ankles approximately. And I'm going to step in it, and then I'm going to stand up, and it starts pulling these pelvic straps down and relieves that pressure against that artery and lets the blood start flowing again. So this can buy somebody some time until we can do a physical rescue. Now, if for some reason he was injured on the way down and he's lost consciousness, he's really going to be dependent on you guys to effect the rescue as quickly as we can. So the first thing we should do is call 911, alert the supervisor. We want to get medical personnel on site as quickly as possible. And when you guys work on remote job sites, it's probably a good idea to visit the nearby first responder or fire department and find out what their capabilities are. In today's world, we have a lot of litigation, and not every fire department has a high angle rescue team. So they may defer to the next department, and it could be another 20 minutes before somebody gets there. So it's a good idea to plan ahead, understand what they can do for you to help you, and that will help you determine what you might need to do for rescue on site. Okay? Now, once somebody has fallen, they're suspended, and we get them down, we want to, once we get them down, if the paramedics aren't here yet, let's keep them in a sitting position with their knees tucked up just a little bit. If they have developed any blood clots, if we lay them out flat or stand them up, they could break free and race to the heart, lungs, or the brain and kill them. So let's keep them in a sitting position until they can be evaluated and released by medical personnel. Okay? So that's a brief on the suspended trauma syndrome. It's not a standard yet to have these on your harnesses, but best practice, I think it's a good idea that everybody have these. These are just, it's higher end harnesses. They'll come as a standard feature, but you can put these on any harness out there, and regardless of who the manufacturer is. Okay? So kind of have a little plan when you're working, and just think about it. Maybe have something nearby in case somebody falls. Okay? All right, if there's no questions on that, let's talk about our body support. Our harnesses are designed, and most of the load's going to travel down. And we also want to inspect these harnesses. OSHA says we got to do an inspection prior to use on our harnesses and all of our fall protection equipment. And then we also have to have an annual inspection that's conducted by a competent certified person to do inspections of fall protection equipment. That has to be logged and documented. But on our initial inspection, so you know they construct a harness. You have your torso straps that go up and down. You have a chest strap, and then you have your pelvic leg straps and the sub-pelvic strap. And then on the back of the harness, where the D-ring is underneath it at the torso straps, we have what we call impact indicators, and they take part of the material and they fold it, and they put a couple stitches in it. So if this is involved in a fall or impact, or it's been loaded, that stitching is going to rip open, and that's a visual indicator for you to know it's been under a load. And if it has been stressed and that indicator's popped, we're going to take it out of service, we're going to document it, and then we're supposed to cut them up. If you throw it in a dumpster hole without cutting it up and somebody uses it and they get hurt, they can hold you liable for that. So that's why we cut it up when we take soft goods out of service. So we look at the impact indicators, one on each side, and this is mandatory. Manufacturers have to have these on the back side of the harness, an impact indicator for you. After that, we're going to look at the label. The label has to be present and legible. If it's not legible or present, that's grounds to reject the harness and fail it. But there's valuable information in there, the capacity, which is very important. The standard calls out the capacity of our fall protection equipment is rated at 310 pounds per worker. That includes your tools and your clothing. But several years ago, Nancy said if you can construct your fall protection equipment for a capacity of 420 pounds, as long as it passes all the testing, we can increase that capacity. So today, all of our harnesses are rated at 420 pounds, but not all lanyards and not all retractables are rated at 420 pounds. So that guy over 310 pounds, if he has to have that 420 rated harness, you want to make sure that your lanyard or your connecting your retractable device is also rated at 420. So again, that's a good reason we need to have legible labels so we can identify it. Because I know we don't all walk around with the instruction manuals with us. So the labels are very important to identify what kind of protection, capacity, and classification, and that kind of stuff. So the label's in good shape. We're going to look at the webbing. The webbing's made out of polyester, which is basically plastics extruded into a fiber. So there are things that's going to affect our webbing, like high heat, flames will melt polyester and burn it. So if you're a welder working at height, you would require a hot work approved harness, maybe made out of Kevlar, but you require your connectors, lanyards, and SRLs to be hot work approved as well. Okay, so same thing for electricians working at height. We actually have arc flash rated harnesses, lanyards, and SRLs as well. So know your hazard and select the appropriate equipment from there. Chemical splash, you probably don't have a lot of chemicals you use on site, but maybe. But we want you to do the feel test, and you want to feel for like a dry, hard, brittle area. And a lot of times a chemical splash will, after it dries, it will cause a discoloration and a brittle, dry, hard spot. That's a weak point on the harness. That's reason to fail the harness and take it out of service. It doesn't, when you splash something on it, it may not necessarily always discolor it. That's why we ask you guys to do a field test and just make sure there's not a brittle, dry, hard spot on that webbing anywhere, okay? I think you heard that you can't write on the webbing with a marker, put your name on it or company number, employee number on there. Some of the manufacturers will allow you to use a Sharpie marker, and they have a letter of that, but the manufacturers put that in the inspection process in the instructions, and they say no writing on the webbing. Honestly, it really doesn't hurt, but as long as it's in that manual, people like OSHA are going to enforce that. So we have failed many harnesses because the guy's writing on the webbing, and most companies have a policy against that. So now they leave little blank areas on the label protectors or the covers, and you can write your name on there or somewhere other than the webbing. Another big culprit on here would be like paint. Little mist from a can of spray paint's not a big deal, but it's that excessive paint that dries and leaves a dry, brittle, hard spot. That's why we say no paint. Concrete guys, same way. Concrete beats these things up, and you get that dry, hard spot on there from concrete or paint. It causes a weak spot, can rupture the fibers within the webbing as well. Cuts, tears, burns, abrasion, or other things we want to look at. A hole or a cut greater than 1/8 of an inch, guys, that's grounds to reject the harness. That's a weak spot in the harness. It doesn't sound like much, but at the end of the day, this is designed to protect you from hitting the ground if you fall. And I know everybody here has family and friends that want you to come home every night, so please make sure when you inspect your harnesses, we're doing a thorough job, and look for those little imperfections or damage to the harness. If you have a split or a cut, a tear right on the edge, it's a good idea to take it out of service, because if you impact it, it's probably going to continue to rip. Abrasion, there's different degrees of abrasion. You got light abrasion, moderate abrasion, heavy abrasion, and this is subjected to your judgment, and encourage you to err on the side of caution. If I have light abrasion, I'm going to make a mental note of it, and I can keep it in service. But if it's moderate or heavy abrasion, just like your old shirts, I get those fuzz balls, starts pilling, that material is wearing out. Moderate to heavy abrasion, it's time to take it out of service. Okay? Other than that, on the webbing, those are the main points you want to look at. Don't forget to look at that impact indicator first. If it's popped, there's no sense of inspecting the rest of the harness. Same thing with the label. If it's not legible, there's no sense of inspecting the rest of the harness. Okay, so look at that webbing and make sure it's in good repair. The next thing is the metal hardware. The big culprit here is rust and corrosion. We fail a lot of harnesses because of rust and corrosion. But there's a couple areas that get overlooked because they're kind of hidden underneath the webbing. And we do the annual inspection for a lot of companies, and we'll find buckles and D-rings in certain areas where the rust is pitting the metal. That's when it's time to take it out. I can live with a little surface rust, but if it's pitting the metal, that metal's breaking down, it's time to take it out. And here's the areas you want to be aware of that get overlooked. You know, we sweat in these things, right? Where the webbing comes through the D-ring here, we capture moisture in the corners, and it builds up rust, and it gets very abrasive, and it actually starts cutting the webbing. And I bet you might find a little rust on your D-rings if you look in those areas on your harnesses you have. The buckles, where two pieces of webbing come together and attach top dorsal part to the leg straps in that. Look underneath that webbing at the bar or your buckle, whether it has a roller and a pin in there or if it's just a flat bar. But guys overlook this. We found those almost rusted through in some instances. If the guy would have fallen, that would have been a big issue. So make sure you look at any of those buckles where moisture could get trapped and they might get overlooked. Also look at your connection points on the harnesses. You know, I know a lot of the harnesses have what we call the pass-through buckle, the parachute type buckle. Just make sure it's free of any corrosion and it's not deformed, warped or anything like that. If you have the belt buckle and leg strap like this, on your belt buckle, just again, corrosion, rust, or anything deformed, make sure it's in good repair. And then our grommets on our leg straps should be securely fastened and not spinning around in there. So just look for that and you should be in good shape. On some harnesses, like on this harness I'm wearing, I have padding on it and it's removable so I can inspect the webbing underneath it. But if you have harnesses that the webbing's sewn underneath the padding, look on that padding where you know the webbing is, and if there's any damage to that padding, you should assume that there's damage to the webbing underneath, and you would take it out of service at that point. On some harnesses, where the D-ring comes in, we'll use these plastic, what I call web keepers. It keeps the webbing crisscrossed. Every once in a while they'll get a bad recipe on the plastic and it becomes brittle, it cracks and causes an edge, and it starts cutting the webbing. So we want to be sure that any of the plastic web keepers, for example, I have one here at the chest strap and my torso strap, same thing here. We want to make sure these are in good repair and nothing cracked that could create an edge for us. And those are really the main things you want to look at on your harness for your inspection. So again, impact indicator first, look at the label second. Let's inspect our webbing, cuts, tears, burns, abrasion, ink, paint, heavy soiling, grease, oil, and cooling agents will degrade the webbing. We fail a lot of harnesses because they're heavily soiled and dirty. So if we clean these once in a while, you might get another year or two out of them, but they can't be cleaned as long as you use a mild detergent like Dawn dishwashing detergent. Just agitate it in a bucket with a little soap in there, rinse it off, and then dry off your metal hardware so it doesn't rust. Okay? So those are the main things to look for on inspections of our harnesses. Any questions, guys? Okay, another issue we have is guys not wearing their harnesses cinched up properly, and if they fall, they're getting hurt. We've had guys take a head dive off a building and their chest strap, torso straps are loose and they squeeze right out of the harness and hit the ground. Also your leg straps, if those are loose, they can ride up and over and do some serious damage downstairs. So when we cinch up our harnesses, we want to kind of cinch it up like we wear our waist belt on our pants. It's nice and snug, right? And a little test for you guys, you can use your hand or 2 fingers, but I want my hand between my leg strap and my leg, I want it to be snug. If I can make a fist like this, that's too loose. We could have some serious damage if it rides up and over. But I want it snug. Same thing with my torso straps. I want it snug. I don't want to be able to make a fist. That's too loose. Same thing with the chest straps, snug. And I know I keep harping on that, but if you snug it up properly and you have the right size harness for you, and we do have sizing charts, but if you inspect it properly, size it up properly, and you have that incident and you fall, this is designed to protect you. So make sure you do your inspections thoroughly, have the right size harness, and snug it up. This is why we put padding on harnesses years ago for your comfort. You know, if you have a basic harness like this one I was showing you, on a hot, steamy, humid day in this area, you got straps digging through your shoulder and into your legs causing a rash, and I know that's uncomfortable. And that's why we put padding on here, is for you to be more comfortable. But you still got, regardless of what kind of harnesses you have or utilize, you want to make sure you're going to snug them up properly. Okay, if we don't have any questions there, let's talk about our lanyards and our SRLs, our retractable. Let's just briefly go over the inspection process of a lanyard. If you have a bungee style internal shock pack 6-foot lanyard, on your snap hooks you want to make sure both functions of the gate work properly and they lock. The gate should come in contact with the hook. Shouldn't be any play in there. Make sure it's free of corrosion and anything that might be warped or anything like that. On these bungees tight, you're going to have to pull that sleeve and inspect and look for any damage between the crinkles there. But if you see any damage on this outer sleeve, there's probably damage on the inside, so we would fail it, document it, fail it, and take it out of service and cut it up. We also have our, this is an external shock pack, so this one you're probably familiar with as well. Again, on the webbing, you know, you're looking for that cut, tear, burn, abrasion, heavy soiling, paint, and things like that. We just talked about the snap hook, but on these shock packs, the best way to tell you to inspect these is make sure it's like in new condition. Labels got to be present and legible. If by chance, sometimes in the manufacturing process, they will expose a few stitches, and that's not a problem. They just cannot be ripped or broken. So if you see stitches, as long as they're intact, that's fine. But overall, you want the shock pack to be in good repair. Okay? So we have single leg lanyards, and we also have twin leg lanyards. Everybody know what a twin leg lanyard is used for? For 100% tie off. We could always have one of these legs attached to something. I can travel with this. I can also have snap hooks on this end or the rebar Pelican hook type. The twin leg, 100% tie off, and it's a good traveling device. One other lanyard I want to talk about, and this will play into my Class A and Class B SRLs, which we'll talk about. But my traditional 6-foot lanyard, this shock pack, when it deploys, will get the arresting force down to 900 pounds. The maximum arresting force allowed to place on the body is 1,800 pounds per OSHA. If we exceed 1,800 pounds, we can start ripping skin and other types of injuries. But the average of 900 pounds here is going to be a lot easier on the body, but we can go as high as 1,800 pounds, but not to exceed. Now here I have what we call the extended free fall capacity lanyard, and it's got a more robust shock pack. This is, you know, OSHA states we cannot have a greater free fall than 6 foot. But think about the guy, the iron worker, and he's on the top I-beam. He's going to have to tie off at foot level. So if you know you're going to be in a position where you have to tie off at foot level, you want a device that's going to give you that added protection. And this lanyard, if I'm tied off at foot level, I'm not only going to fall 6 foot length of the lanyard, but my height as well. And if you're 6 foot tall, that would end up being a 12-foot free fall. So you're going to have greater forces and energy when you come to the end of the rope, so to speak. So you have a more robust shock pack that's going to give you that added protection. But again, I just want you to think about it. You know that when you go to work in the morning, you're going to be tied off at foot level. Have a device that's designed for you to tie off at foot level, because it's going to give you that added protection in case you do fall. Okay, let's stick with the lanyards, then we'll get into our SRLs. So we'll use an average height of 6 foot. if I got a 6-foot lanyard, how much clearance do I need for a 6-foot lanyard to keep a 6-foot guy from hitting the object or a surface below me? How much? 12? No. A little louder?
18.
18 is very good. We're going to inch it up just a little bit, but let's just walk through it, because this is probably the most misused, abused piece of fall protection equipment there is. Guys are getting hurt using these lanyards all the time. If I'm 6 foot tall, I got to account for my height. I add a 6-foot lanyard in there. We got to add that to my height of 6 foot, so we're at 12 foot. My shock pack here, this is 48 inches, 4 feet. So we got to add that to the 12 foot. We're already at 16 feet. I also said we have to have our D-ring when we fall. We're going to have about a 1.5 foot D-ring slide. So let's add a 1.5 foot to 16. So we're at 17.5 feet. And OSHA tells us we have to have a 2-foot safety factor. It used to be 6 inches and we would go with 18 feet. But now they up that to 2 feet. Guardian actually quotes 3-foot safety factor, but we'll go with OSHA. So with OSHA, a 2-foot safety factor added to 17.5, we're at 19.5 foot for a 6-foot lanyard to keep a guy from hitting the object or surface below. Does that make sense, everybody? That's provided my anchor point is at my back dorsal D-ring, our shoulder height. If I happen to be tied off down around my knees, let's say, I would have to add another 3 feet or so to that calculation. I could be at 22.5, 23 feet. So there's a lot to think about when using our lanyards. Is anybody using a lanyard in a lift? Good. Where I was this morning, I had guys that are using 6-foot lanyards and JLG. And we know that's a no-no, right? Everybody's seen the JLGs and the guy hits the little curb and it wants to spring him out of the basket. If you're in a 6-foot lanyard, it's going to flip you out of that basket. Now they do have adjustable lanyards. We can adjust them down to 2 foot. That's acceptable. But that's the only lanyard, a 2-foot lanyard, really you should ever use in a basket. Matter of fact, we prefer to use a retractable because they lock up like a seatbelt. That way there's no question if the guy's got it adjusted to the proper length. So this is a 6-foot retractable Class A self-retractable lifeline. Some people call it a yo-yo. But a Class A is like my extended free fall lanyard. And the one thing I didn't tell you, the extended free fall lanyard for that 12 foot, because you're falling further, this shock pack when it deploys, it's 54 inches versus the standard 48 inches. And it will reduce that impact load, that shock, down to 1,350, 1,350 pounds. But that's still well below 1,800, right? So our Class A SRL is very similar. It will get the arresting force down to 1,350, but the maximum payout after the fall is 2 feet. Maximum. So if we know that, now we can calculate our clearances, and instead of having to have that 19.5 foot of clearance, let's talk it out on the Class A. I take my height to 6 foot. Maximum deceleration or payout 2 feet, so we're at 8 foot. I have to allow for D-ring slide, so that's a 1.5 foot. Let's add that. So we're at 9.5 feet, and then I need my safety factor of 2 feet. So with a Class A SRL, I need 11 feet of clearance, 11.5 foot of clearance for this to keep me safe for a 6-foot guy. That's a lot less than 19.5 feet, right? Yeah, 11.5 feet. So this is going to, you'll be able to work in those areas with a lower clearance where you couldn't do it with the lanyard. Now if we go to a Class B SRL, Class B is very similar to my everyday 6-foot lanyard. It will get the arresting force down to 900 pounds. But in order to get that arresting force down a little bit lower, we have to allow you to fall just a little bit further. So this is a Class B device right here. The maximum potential payout is 54 inches. So again, if I take my 6-foot height and I take 54 inches, which is 4.5 feet. I added it to my 6 foot. We're at 10.5 feet. I add my D-ring slide of 1.5 feet, so my 12 foot, and my 2 foot safety factor. So 14 feet versus 19.5 with a 6 foot lanyard with a Class B SRL. And if you have retractables on the site here, the label should be legible so you can identify if it's a Class A or Class B, so you know how to do your calculations properly. And if you see the chart on the left side of the door there, it has Class A, Class B, 6 foot lanyard, 12 foot free fall lanyard, and our leading edge device. Is everybody with me so far on that? So it's important to understand what your retractables are, Class A or Class B, so we can calculate the correct height. I've got one of these charts in a little smaller version here I'm going to leave with you guys. You can post them around the facility, job trailer, or whatever you want to do. But you do have a calculation, clearance calculation chart here for you. Okay, we have to inspect these as well. When you inspect the small retractables that it uses webbing as opposed to steel, wire, rope, on either one of them, whether it's wire or web, you have to pull the webbing all the way out. And we were on a construction site about 6 years ago. We were inspecting these small retractables, and the guys were not inspecting them correctly. We found about 6 of their units, somebody had taken a knife and cut them 3/4 of the way through. Now obviously they had a disgruntled employee, but point is they were not checking them and they did not catch that damage, and had they fallen it would have failed and they would have hit the ground. So regardless of why the damage is there, you have to pull it out all the way and make sure the webbing or the cable is in good shape from end to end. You also want to pull on it and make sure it locks up. These lock up like a seatbelt. The housing should be in good repair, no holes or gouges in it. If we get debris up in the mechanisms and the gears in there, it could affect the braking or locking mechanism. So that's why we want the housing to be in good repair. Okay? When we use a 6 foot lanyard and if we fall, think about the clearance we need. How far below the anchor point we're going to be. At least a minimum, depending on the weights involved, at least a minimum of 13.5, 14 feet, probably below that anchor point, utilizing a 6 foot lanyard. I am not going anywhere until somebody physically comes and rescues me, right? On our self-retractables, you know, this is always under tension. So there's really no free fall because there's no slack in the line like we would have with a 6 foot lanyard. So when you fall on one of these, you don't have that slack or free fall distance, very little. So you're not generating all that energy and all those forces. So, and these lock up very quickly. I think you can see it, how quickly this locks up. The Class A and the Class B pretty much lock up within just a few inches. We always have to teach worst case scenario so you get the proper clearance, just because if we do happen to hit that worst case scenario, we want you to have the proper clearance. But I can tell you by using this weight and dropping these retractables, a lot of times I can barely get more than 4, 5, 6 inches of additional payout. And if I'm only falling a few inches, is there a possibility I might be able to grab onto something and pull myself back up to where I came from? There's a possibility. It's not a rescue device, but it might help you assist yourself in your own rescue. So self-retractables are really the way to go. It's the safest device. And with the Class A version of the retractables, maximum payout's only 2 feet, so we can work in those areas where we have lower clearances. And in some cases, we don't always have a device where you can walk or work utilizing your fall arrest equipment. You have to revert back to scaffolding or ladders and lifts in some cases. But we're getting better all the time with more solutions. Is everybody pretty good on that? Just one more thing on the wire rope type SRL. These need to be inspected as well. Technically speaking, we're allowed 5 broken wires on the cable. But best practice, if there's any broken wires, let's go ahead and take it out of service. and not take the chance, because I could get technical here, but I don't have that much time. But again, you want to pull the cable all the way out, and when you inspect this, you're going to let it slide back into housing. Make sure you got some gloves on, because it's broken wires and it cut your hands up. But as you're doing the visual, it's retracting in the housing, and if you get a broken wire, it should catch on that glove. An area that gets overlooked on our cable retractables is where we have the cable crimped together underneath this rubber swedge. So we need to pull that down and look at these crimps. Most manufacturers use steel. This one happens to be using copper, so it's not going to corrode as quickly. But particularly on SRLs and retractables used outdoors, a lot of times we pull these rubber swedges back and we find significant rust on these crimps. So out of sight, out of mind. So pull these back and look at those crimped areas once in a while, okay? Another area of concern is our leading edge. How much time I got? You doing good? 4 hours. Let me just check the time. Okay. Could I get somebody to take some pictures of the group while I'm talking?
Yeah, I'll just forward the ones I have.
Okay. Okay, leading edge. You know, you might have heard the term sharp edge and not so sharp edge or smooth edge. But really, we need to think about it, an edge is an edge. And some manufacturers are talking about sharp edges, and they want you to physically measure the edge and find out how sharp it is. Have you guys ever measured an edge? And that's just the point. I don't think anybody's going to measure the sharpness of an edge. So we could have a metal deck, we could have concrete, we could have wood. Anything that's got a perpendicular edge at 90-degree angle is an edge, okay? Unless you got a big round, smooth round pipe, we should just consider everything an edge or even a sharp edge. So the reason I bring this up, if you're working on a flat surface, a roof, it could be machinery as well, but anything that has an edge and that cable can come in contact with the edge. You know, we go over the edge and it locks up, and where is all that arresting force going to be applied to? It's going to be applied on the cable at the edge. And on our older units from years ago, those cables would snap in half, because that edge would act like a knife. Now we have self-retractables that are approved for leading edge. And we have a shock pack in line that when you come off that edge, it locks up, shock pack deploys, taking all that arresting force we generated on the fall off the cable, and prevents the cable from snapping in half. And it's noted on the label of the SRL's leading edge. Some manufacturers put a leading edge on there and then put a big red X on there for the units that are not approved for leading edge. But it will be identified on the unit itself if it's approved for leading edge. So anytime you find yourself in a situation where the cable can come in contact with a leading edge, you want to approve the leading edge device, okay? This is a 20-footer. We have them up to 65-footers. We even have personal units. We can do a twin leg like this for 100% tie-off and a leading edge version. This is a single leg, but you notice it's got the steel cable. There's shock absorber capabilities in the gears and the housing here, and there's a shock pack inside this back pad. So if maintenance guys on machinery, if they fall, they can come across edges too. So we have the smaller units available as well. All the manufacturers do. But just remember, anytime you have the potential to come in contact with that edge, you really want a leading edge device for that added protection. And as a matter of fact, some companies are strictly buying leading edge retractables only and will not allow regular SRLs on their site. Are we good so far with that, guys? One other thing I want to talk to, because we've had guys try to, you go up in the lift, you forgot your anchor point. But some guys will take their end of their SRLs or their lanyards and wrap around to the structure and tie off. We've always been told no, that's a no-no. And the reason why is because of force rollout issues. And that occurs if you fall and this strap comes across the gate, it can force that gate open. That's pretty much been eliminated since we increased the gate strength to 3,600 pounds. And with the exception of wrap back tie back, it's still not allowed except for this device here. This is a wrap back tie back 6-foot SRL. It's actually a 9-footer with the 3-foot pigtail. But if you notice the snap hook, instead of being nice and round up here, it's flat. When I see that, I recognize it as a wrap back tie back approved device. And I think you guys all know, but the anchor points you tie off to are supposed to be rated. It's an uncertified rating of 5,000 pounds. Certified anchor is rated at 3,600 pounds, and you have to have a structural engineer come in and certify it and sign off on it. But if we're working on an uncertified anchor, our anchor point for our structure, it's rated at 5,000 pounds. So all of my anchor points, whether it's a cross arm strap, an I-beam anchor like this, these are all rated at 5,000 pounds, the same thing as our anchor point where we're tying off to. So again, back to the wrap back tie back, this hook and this gate, because it becomes part of my anchor point, this becomes the anchor point now. The gate on this snap hook is rated at 5,000 pounds, just like my anchor point or my tie-off point for the structure. So this is the only device approved to wrap back tie back. So now if I've got this, I got some versatility. You can get these in twin leg for 100% tie-off. It's very versatile and it's approved to use in that configuration. Any questions, guys? Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and do some drop tests now. And I want you to know the surface we're on right now sometimes absorbs some of the impact, so I might have a low reading. It's just the nature of how load cell, and with the struts and the shocks on the van and a soft surface, sometimes on the initial first drop, I'll get a low reading, but we'll see what happens. First drop that we're going to do is going to utilize a restraint lanyard. This is a 4-foot restraint lanyard. So it's for restraint only. It's not for fall arrest. There's no shock pack on here to absorb any energy. But the reason we do this drop is because how many guys are worried about working at 4 foot? Is it very scary? Not really. 4 feet doesn't seem to be that dangerous. The thing is, the average weight of a worker today is 220 pounds. I think it's probably gone up a little bit. But if I drop 220 pounds 4 feet, we can generate up around 3,600 pounds of force and energy. That's pretty significant, guys, 3,600 pounds. So, and notice that's the same thing as our certified anchor points too. But so the first drop is just to show you how we can generate all this force and energy at 4 foot. And so we'll do that, then we'll do a shock absorbing lanyard, and we will drop that, and then I'll hook up an SRL and show you how that works. So let's start with this one.
Stand underneath that rig.
All right, let's see what happens on this first one. Hopefully I'll have a little bit of higher reading, but don't be surprised if it's a little low because of those reasons I gave you. Now let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3. And just as I suspected, we got a low reading, but that's still 2,100 146 pounds of force just on that 4-foot free fall. Just imagine what the body would feel like if you experience those kind of forces there. Now you probably would survive that, but you got a shock wave going through your body, through your organs. That could cause some significant injuries as well, ripped skin, or who knows what it could do. So bear with me, let me hook up another shock absorbing lanyard and we'll do the drop again.
How much does the weight you're using weigh, Mark?
This weight weighs 220 pounds. All right, so see where that D-ring is on that weight? Imagine that's a D-ring of a harness, okay? And if we have to allow for D-ring slide after the fall, about a 1.5 feet, imagine where our head would be in relations to that D-ring on this fall. And this we'll talk about a little bit of the calculating the right clearance. And also the shock absorber lanyard shows you how we dissipate some of that energy. So, let's see what happens here. 1, 2, 2. 996 pounds of force. So we went from 2,100 plus down to a little bit under 1,000. So that's pretty significant change, isn't it? So we dissipated that energy, and now we allow for that 1.5 foot harness D-ring slide. Our head's going to be about yay high right here. The rest of our body hit the ground because we weren't at the proper height, right? So again, understanding how to calculate those clearances is very important in case we have that accident. So give me another second, I'll hook up an SRL and we'll do another drive.
Allowed to have the lanyards.
Have you guys ever seen the inside of a shot pack after it's been deployed? Check it out. and not all of it deployed. It would depend on, you know, if I had 250 pounds, more of that would have paid out.
Oh, okay. I was wondering about that.
But yeah, you can't even pull that another inch apart. I mean, that is very strong material.
Oh, you
All right, guys, you ready for the retractable drop? So, you know, a while ago I was talking about if you fall on a lanyard and you're going to be 13, 14 feet below the anchor point with an SRL, it's only going to pay out so far, probably lock up in a matter of inches, and maybe you can self-rescue yourself. But I can't always put a new SRL on here because they just get to be too expensive. So this has been impacted several times. But it still functions very, very, very well. If you impact any equipment, lanyards, SRLs, your harness, even your anchor points, all that is taken out of service. Soft goods, normally we document it, destroy it so nobody else can use it. The larger SRLs can be sent back and repaired and recertified. But generally, at 20 foot or less in length for a retractable, we usually consider those disposable because by the time you send it in for repair and paid the fees and shipping, you could have bought a new one for less. So the larger SRLs we can recertify. The smaller one, it's on that borderline. Probably best just to buy a new one. But so this has not been recertified. But I've got about 12 inches of the cable exposed. And it's wanting to, you know, retain that tension and retract into the housing so you have no slack and free fall. The first time I did a drop on this, I had about 6 inches of the cable payout, and I had a reading of like 735. It was well below 900 pounds, so it was really good. But now that I've impacted a few times, I'm going to have a little bit more payout, and the load rating's probably going to be a little higher, but it should be under 1,100 pounds still. So let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3. So maybe 13, 14 inches of cable, additional cable paid out. Would you agree? 806 pounds of force were generated. So we didn't have that free fall distance because we don't have any slack in the line. So we're not generating all that force. Even 24, 28 inches, 30 inches, I still might be able to grab onto something and pull myself up and not have to worry about being rescued. So that's why we always talk about our self-retractables are really a safer device, a better device. We can work in those areas where we have a lower clearance, and we'd like to see lanyards go away just because a lot of guys don't know how to calculate the proper clearance, they're misused, and things of that nature. So. And one other thing I want to say is eventually OSHA is probably going to start talking about tool tethers and lanyards, just something to be aware of. We have a nice line of that product, Guardian, owned by a company called Pure Safety. They bought Tri-Float out of New Hampshire. They do all the tool tethers and things like that. They bought a company called Checkmate out of the UK that does high-end SRLs and harnesses, but they moved that whole manufacturing facility to Houston, Texas, so they brought jobs back to the U.S. Everything's going to have a Made in the USA tag on it, but just down the road, now that we have an ANSI standard on tool tethers and lanyards for dropping tools, it's probably going to come our way sometime. You know how OSHA is, they can be really slow, or all of a sudden they're starting to enforce something. So, but with that, guys, I appreciate your time. Work safely, cinch up your harnesses, make sure they're in good repair, do your inspections, and understand your equipment, SRLs and lanyards, and the proper clearance required to stay safe, okay?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, guys.